In this scene, Laertes explains how the world works to Ophelia. I've called this slide, this PowerPoint, Mansplaining 1. That's partly because Polonius is about to do some mansplaining of his own to Ophelia. The very basic premise of this scene, if I can mansplain it to you, just bear with me. I think you'll find that the very basic premise of this scene is that Laertes talks over Ophelia and does so in particularly general terms. He comes up with all kinds of gnomic, I put the word here, nostrums, general truths about the way it works. So, for example, general truths, virtue itself scapes not calumnious strokes. You can be as wonderful as you like, but that doesn't make you invulnerable to accusations of corruption. In short, you might be virginal, but your association with Hamlet risks people drawing the opposite conclusions. Now, in order to be so patronizing, Laertes does use the language of toys, of childhood. He says, for Hamlet and the trifling of his favour, hold it a fashion and a toy in blood. Now, Laertes, he slightly does what Hamlet does here. It's James Shapiro, I think, who finds that Hamlet uses the rhetorical figure of hendiadys a lot. That is to say, the technique of saying one thing in two different ways. And that almost suggests how fertile Hamlet's mind is, how quickly it looks for other ways to express it, how incompletely a single word would wrap upon his feelings. Now, Laertes has the same problem, but I would suggest for a different reason. I think he fears that he's not making himself clear to Ophelia. Now, I have here identified it as another kind of rhetorical trick called lucus a non lucendo. Now, what that literally means, a lucus is actually a grove, and it's a pun on lux, meaning a light, a kind of grove, a gathering of trees. And what it means is that you can tell it's a lot of trees because there's no light coming from it. And it almost says, it's almost a way of saying in rhetoric, people can be clearer about what a thing is by saying what it isn't. Hamlet's love for you, therefore, Ophelia, is a violet. It is forward, not permanent, sweet, not lasting, as if those things were mutually exclusive. But actually, Laertes is kind of fumbling around for exactly what it is that Hamlet's love isn't, if that makes any sense. And Laertes fears it doesn't. So, Ophelia, who clearly is showing an interest in Hamlet's love, no more but so. Hamlet questions the assertion, are you absolutely sure? And then Laertes, with an imperative, having heard, not for the first time, in fact it happens twice here, Ophelia gets out 4 syllables, do you doubt that? And is cut down by an imperative here. Hold it a fashion, not a toy in blood. And then it happens, no more but so, 4 more syllables, think it no more. His own 4 syllables, his own 2 I ams, absolutely slash it down with yet another imperative. So here begins the lesson, here begins the lecture. You must fear his greatness weighed. And this is the phrase I particularly want you to latch onto because it begins to speak about the political situation here. His will is not his own. And then later on he says, the main voice of Denmark goes with all, with his choice. Now, the irony here is, and you might want to bear in mind this if politics comes up in section B, the irony here is that the more powerful a person is, or the more high up they are, the less freedom they have. It almost suggests, and again in terms that Cicero would understand, it almost suggests an idea of a social contract. Bear in mind that the values of this court in Elsinore, if we are going to call them the humanistic ones that Cicero wanted, Cicero was somebody who believed in a republic. Cicero would have been quite sympathetic perhaps to the idea of an elective monarchy. So there is this idea, and it's inherent in Laertes' speech, and it comes up elsewhere too, that being a king is an act of public service, that in you resides the health of your state. Now, Ophelia here is therefore seen by Laertes to be a threat to that body politic, and that Hamlet cannot therefore sully the state with his dealings with Ophelia, nor can Ophelia sully herself. Therefore, must his choice be circumscribed, written around, defined, determined, unto the voice and yielding of that body, note the slightly sexual language here, whereof he is the head. Now after that enjambement, we move away from the sexual language, and Laertes, who almost slipped up on his own rhetoric, almost has to correct himself to say, I'm talking about countries, and I'm not making that Hamlet pun. And so he warns Ophelia, first of all, about how little Hamlet can promise to her, and second of all, in this second part, about the consequences for her own reputation if she allows this dalliance to continue. The chariest maid is prodigal enough if she unmask her beauty to the moon. There is a strong hint there with a reference to Diana of chastity, of being a virgin, but if you expose yourself, then there's absolutely no way that we can protect your reputation. Now, who cannot but love Ophelia's answer? She doesn't have many words. She is talked over. But it's worth remembering all of these words. Good my brother, do not, and she has an imperative of her own, a negative one too, as some ungracious pastors do, show me the steep and thorny way to heaven. Don't tell me to do the hard stuff, whiles a puffed and reckless libertine himself the primrose path of dalliance treads. That word dalliance, it's almost what he's been accusing her of being about to do. Dalliance meaning straying, but also a dalliance in the sense of an affair, a tryst. And recks not his own reed. Do not be a hypocrite. Do not lecture me and fail to take your own observations to heart. Laertes finishes, "Oh, fear me, I stay too long." There's no hint of an apology. Polonius arrives. There's going to be another lecture, and we'll look at that in our next slide.